president, Trump will make sure no one cuts Medicare or Social Security. Trump lowered Medicare premiums, and he'll end the tax on Social Security.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
Harris, illegal aliens are pouring into our country, including murderers, rapists, and even terrorists. Instead of paying for their crimes and receiving justice, Kamala will give criminal illegal aliens taxpayer-funded transgender surgeries.
Surgery?
For prisoners.
For prisoners, every transgender inmate would have access.
Crazy liberal Kamala's for they, them. President Trump is for you. Make America Great Again Inc. is responsible for the content of this.
And it is clear, both campaigns, they need Georgia if they want to go to the White House. Both candidates have been making weekly stops here in the state. The Harris campaigns brought out the big guns. Thursday, former President Donald Trump is set to return Monday as early voting continues. But today, we saw Senator and Vice Presidential candidate J.D. Vance make a stop right here in downtown Atlanta. Thanks for staying with us for Fox 5 News at 11. I'm Eric Perry. A third of registered voters in Georgia already casting their ballots there, and Vance wants to keep that energy going to the polls. Fox 5's Kim Loeffler was at the event. She has the latest.
Senator J.D. Vance spoke in front of hundreds Saturday in downtown Atlanta. His visit comes as Georgians continue to vote early in record numbers, with more than 1 in 4 voters already casting their ballots.
I think the Republican voters have more confidence in early voting this year. And look, I've got more confidence in early voting this year.
Both former President Trump and Vice President Harris are neck and neck in Georgia, a critical swing state.
We've got to use every method that we can to get out there and vote. Whether that's vote by mail, whether that's early voting, whether that's voting on election day, make sure you get out there and make your voice heard.
For attendees, immigration and the economy were top of mind.
I think the biggest one is the border crisis and the need to lock down the border.
We're definitely better off when Trump was in office. Tax cuts are way better than tax hikes.
The most important way that President Trump is going to lower prices for American citizens, it's very simple. Drill, baby, drill. We got to open up American energy. I certainly don't begrudge anybody for wanting to come to this country for a better life, but number one, you got to do it the proper way. You got to come through the proper channels.
Senator Vance also encouraged attendees to keep the energy up through Election Day. We asked the senator about his message to undecided voters.
We cannot get back to peace and prosperity. We cannot get back to affordable groceries and a secure southern border by doing the same exact things with the exact same leaders. We need change. We need new leadership. We need Donald J. Trump. That's our message to voters down the stretch.
We do know former President Trump will be back here in Georgia on Monday. In Atlanta, Kim Loeffler, Fox 5 News.
All right, thanks.
Red, and that is because many Democratic strategists believe that demographics are destiny. Now, let's look at the latest polls coming from the state of Texas to see if this perennial dream of Democrats has any ground to stand on. If we look at the presidential race, we see that former President Donald Trump is leading in the race against Vice President Kamala Harris by 6 points. And if we look at the race for the Senate that right now Senator Ted Cruz holds in the state of Texas, also we see Republicans leading in the polls by 4 points. So why would Democrats have any hopes of flipping Texas red when they are behind in the polls, both presidential and senatorial race? That has to do with demographics and what has happened to the state and in the state of Texas since 2016. Let's look at this next slide. Here we have the share of eligible voters in the state of Texas that are registered to vote. We can see that in 2016, 55.5% of eligible voters in the state of Texas were registered. That increased through 2020 to 2024 to 60% of eligible voters in the state of Texas. That's about 3 million more voters in the state of Texas. And here's where Democrats are hoping that the majority of this 3 million new registered voters in the state of Texas are going to vote blue. Now, why would Democrats have that hope? Well, it has, again, to do with demographics, where people have been moving to in the state of Texas. Let's look here at the map of the state of Texas. We can see that 70% of the population of Texas lives in these four cities in Austin, Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio, heavily urban, suburban areas. We know from the polls that those usually favor Democratic candidates. We also know that, for example, the city of Austin, 60% of the population has a college degree, another statistic that usually favors Democrats. Now, let's look at the last bit of information that gives Democrats hopes of flipping the state of Texas red, and that is the voting trend since 2016. We can see here that when former President Trump beat Secretary Clinton in 2016, Trump had an advantage of 9 points. But in 2018, the Republican senatorial candidate who was seeking re-election, Ted Cruz, only edged Beto O'Rourke by 3 points. And in 2020, Trump only beat Biden by 6 points. So what does these numbers tell us? They tell us that from 2016 to 2020, Trump has lost support in percentage points in the state of Texas from Republicans vis-a-vis Democrats. And we also know that Ted Cruz underperforms former President Donald Trump when he is alone in the battle. So if we go back to the polls, we can see that former President Donald Trump, yes, he's ahead by 6 points, but Senator Ted Cruz is only ahead by 4 points. That is within the margin of error. And Congressman Colin Allred will be hoping that Friday night's rally with Vice President Kamala Harris in Houston will help voter turnout. And that is the explanation as to why Democrats have this perennial hope of flipping Texas red.
President Biden visiting a Native American tribe in a key swing state today. It's marking a historical first, but also coming as Democrats are seeking to woo Native American voters. NTD's Iris Tao has more from the White House.
Fulfilling a promise made nearly 2 years ago, President Biden on Friday paid his first visit as the president to a Native American tribe. Biden also becomes the first U.S. president to formally apologize for the federal Indian boarding schools. Those schools ran for over a century, separating American Indian children from their parents to assimilate them.
Tens of thousands of Native children entered the system. Nearly 1,000 documented Native child deaths. I formally apologize as President of the United States of America for what we did.
The White House says President Biden has been wanting to make this trip for a while. The visit to the Gila River Indian community also comes less than 2 weeks before Election Day. Arizona is a key swing state, and over 200,000 voting-age Native Americans live in Arizona, which Biden narrowly won in 2020 by just around 10,000 votes. The Harris campaign has ramped up its efforts to court Native American voters, and Vice President Harris visited Gila River land earlier this month.
This election is about two very different visions.
Former President Trump was also in Arizona on Thursday, though he has yet to visit the Native American communities there. Meanwhile, the Arizona GOP has been trying to make inroads by meeting with the tribal groups there and urging them to vote Republican. Reporting from the White House, Iris Howe, NTD News.
Large at the Washington Post, Robert Kagan has resigned. This comes after the paper chose not to endorse any political candidate in this presidential election cycle. In an opinion piece, the paper's publisher and CEO, William Lewis, saying, quote, "The Washington Post will not be making an endorsement of a presidential candidate in this election, or any future presidential election. We are returning to our roots of not endorsing presidential candidates." The announcement is a blow to Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris. The Washington Post has endorsed every Democrat for president since 1976, except in 1988 when it didn't endorse anyone. In a separate article, the Washington Post says its editorial team already drafted an endorsement of Harris, but the paper's owner, Jeff Bezos, decided not to publish it. Kagan has been a vocal critic of former President Trump. He did confirm to Fox News that he resigned due to the paper's decision not to endorse any candidate. And former President Trump and Vice President Harris are campaigning in the deep red state of Texas today. Trump will also head to the swing state of Michigan for a rally. We have time coming up. What are the national security risks of Chinese-made chips that go into your cars, computers, and phones and run everything ultimately in our world? We'll talk with a former director of strategy and policy at the State Department. and the potential elimination of the federal income tax could be on the ballot. This comes as former President Trump floated that idea at a New York City barbershop. We'll hear from voters to find out what they think about that possibility. When we come back, that and more when we return. What are the national and economic